Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and if you're new to the channel, I'm on a Wildcard 35 strategy, meaning I'll be dead ending this game week, and I will be taking some 1 week punts and might even be taking a hit given the unfortunate Semenyo red flag that's cropped up and kept him out of the game week in game week 33. There were also a couple of key moments that occurred in game week 33 that are important for anyone who is about to load up on Spurs and Chelsea assets for their 2 upcoming double game weeks, which we'll also cover in this video. But first, I'll very briefly cover off game week 33 and how I did. So if you're not too interested in that, feel free to skip forward to the relevant chapters. But in game week 33, I ended up on 74 points, which was my exact safety score for the week, which actually meant I basically got a grey arrow or a green arrow of like 1k or something equally as small. Crucially, though, for me, I did switch the armband to Haaland about 20 minutes before the deadline when I got news that he was starting, as that removed the rotation risk that I had discussed in my video last week, given that Luton's defense was decimated by injuries. City were sure to flourish. Now, obviously, I'm extremely happy that I caught the 8-point swing there in the late switch of the captain's armband. But in the early team leaks, the 2 most reliable leakers, well, that sounds like a bit of a weird categorization, I suppose, of FPL Main Road and FPL Tony, both on Twitter, both reported that Foden was starting in game week 33, and both actually got this wrong, which is actually rather strange because these 2 accounts have been extremely accurate in the past. Now, I am half wondering if City are closing in on who may be leaking this information from the club, because one way to find leakers would be to leak different team sheets to different players within the City camp and see who reports what in order to narrow down who the leakers are. And with both FPL Main Road and FPL Tony being so reliable, but both getting the same player wrong, I do kind of half wonder if this is what is going on here. Now, it was actually these accounts that I relied on in order to switch the armband to Haaland, so luckily, I suppose, that was the right call from them, and perhaps it was just some sort of late injury to Foden, but I am not aware of any injury to Foden that actually should have kept him out of the squad. So anyway, just something to keep an eye on there from those accounts to see if they do get anything wrong moving forward. Now, my new purchase in game week 33 was Henderson, who I brought in to bench in preparation for the double, and actually ended up getting a huge 9-pointer as a super differential on my bench, but it did not really matter as Newcastle had already played at that point before Henderson pulled in his 9 points and kept a clean sheet, which was highly unexpected against Spurs, who actually put on a very Spursy performance where they lost 4-0, where Newcastle actually fielded a very makeshift backline, playing Dan Burn in centre-back, and also playing Murphy, who is normally an attacking wide forward, brought him into the right wing back role. And finally on my kind of lost my place there. Finally on the team last week, I was actually at 175k, so I'd gone up about 10k in rank across the game week heading into that final Chelsea versus Everton fixture. Now, I say weirdly because I actually ended up losing rank, going from 175k dropping down to 185k with Palmer in my squad at 102% EO, meaning that his points shouldn't have actually affected my rank at all. And I actually had Gusto in my team, who ended up keeping a clean sheet, and he was down at about 35% EO. The only other Chelsea defender that was registering as any sort of ownership was Petrovic, the goalkeeper, at 9% EO, and no one else registering any points. So I'm a little bewildered as to exactly how I dropped 10k worth of rank in that final match where I had the two key players, but that is, I suppose, going to show exactly how close the points are. So I ended up going and having a look at what each point is worth at my rank, and about 1 point above or below me is about 4,000 places in rank. So I must have missed out on 2 points in that Chelsea fixture, which ended up dropping me down to a grey arrow. But there's nothing really else to write home about in the squad. I have a lot of my hopes lined up on Odegaard. He did nothing. Everyone owns Son, Salah, and Gabriel. I was kind of hoping that Gabriel was actually going to miss the team sheet as he had not been training all game week. And I did have Dan Burn sitting on my bench, and sniping him off the bench for 2 weeks in a row for 2 clean sheets would have been quite something that I would have probably been celebrating a lot more heavily. But Gabriel does in fact make the squad. Bournemouth conceded. Solanke scored a goal. He is relatively well owned. He is not hugely owned, but relatively well owned, and that was about it. Because I didn't own Isak, Gordon, or Watkins, I ended up on the grey arrow. So anyway, that wraps up what happened in game week 33. Now, if you skipped forward to this part of the video, I am wildcarding next week, and the 2 key teams that I am wildcarding for are Spurs and Chelsea, who both actually generated some interesting dilemmas that will drive my wildcard decisions next week. And so I thought it would be best to cover those performances here while the matches are still fresh in mind, and because Spurs don't actually have a game this weekend, and so that is the last performance that we will see from them before they double in game week 35. Now, I did kind of go over a little bit of Spurs in the intro, and so I don't really have a hell of a lot to say on them, apart from the fact that I'm having some very strong reservations brewing about loading up too heavily on the Spurs players, given their performance last weekend. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Newcastle, as I thought they played exceptionally well with their makeshift backline, which I did mention in the intro, but was of Burn playing centre-back and Murphy being brought back to play in that right wing-back role as opposed to a wide forward role. That is one hell of a tongue twister there for some reason. But a big reason why Newcastle ended up doing so well is that Spurs were just very poor in the match, and I am having some serious concerns over doubling or tripling up on Spurs assets when I do in fact pull the wild card next week. Now, as I mentioned, they do have no game this weekend, so that is the only performance that we will get to go on heading forward. But definitely something that I thought I should point out in this video. But I also thought I would point it out because I know some of you in the comments have had some similar instincts around Spurs and actually also Chelsea, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. But I thought I'd give a quick shout out to Clyde Bickford here, who said in the comments last week that he's not keen to go with more than 2 Spurs and 2 Chelsea players for the run-in. And I'm just saying, yeah, I'm definitely with you on the Spurs sentiment here, Clyde. And I'm sorry I did not get back to your comment across the week. I actually had a bit of a rough week. But anyway, I thought I'd bring up Spurs here, and they will definitely be something that we will recover in the wildcard video next week. But at the moment, I'm thinking it's probably only going to be Son that makes it into my squad. And I'm not even sure that he is actually top of the list of people that I'm going to want to bring in. I'm probably going to bring him in because 2 doubles is 2 doubles, but yeah, I'm not sure about Son, Madison, and a defender, which was my initial wildcard tentative plan. But anyway, so on the Chelsea front, now there's all sorts going on in the Chelsea game this weekend. But from the performance, I can comfortably say now that Cole Palmer is my favourite player in the Premier League this season, having watched that outstanding hat-trick from him. That first goal was a nutmeg on Branthwaite, then a behind the back of the legs flick pass to Jackson as part of a 1-2 move with Jackson, to then hit a first-time side-footed strike with very little reaction time, slotted into the far post from outside the 18-yard box, is just what football is all about. That's the kind of football that we all want to sit down and watch. Now, he went on to show some of his other qualities by being a bit of, well, incredibly well reader of the game, anticipating deflections and whatnot, which is how he earned his second goal. And then, of course, sinking his hat-trick from almost the halfway line, just outside the semicircle, with his weak foot going over Pickford's head to secure his hat-trick. And then a bit of cream on top with a 4th goal by way of penalty. And it is actually this penalty that I thought that we needed to discuss, because up until this point, Jackson was actually working his way into my wildcard next week. Now, the reason that I did bring up Palmer there is I have now put down in my own personal notes and match thoughts that I need to seriously consider Palmer as a strong captaincy shout each week alongside Salah and Haaland. And I think it's actually been my mistake to not be considering him more seriously up until this point. But anyway, thought I'd give Palmer a bit of a shout out there, because he is by far my most favourite player from the 23-24 season. So, on Jackson, what really surprised me in the Chelsea match was actually Nicholas Jackson's performance, who I have been very unimpressed with earlier this season, but he may have in fact turned my head with this performance and potentially earning himself a spot in my wildcard team next week. Now, his goal from the Cucurella cross was an extremely tough chance to generate for himself and was pure quality in execution. So I'll just really quickly read the match notes here to explain what has happened. 44th minute, Jackson goal, Cucurella assist. Great first touch by Jackson, cushioning the ball out of the air from Cucurella's cross with his weak foot and his back to goal, managing to pull the ball in towards him with that first touch, manufacturing the space to turn towards goal, rolling the defender in the process, and hitting a side volley with his second touch on his natural foot to score near post with downward trajectory on the shot, making it near on impossible to save. This is the type of execution you could make training videos with. What an exceptional finish. Perhaps he's improved enough to warrant purchase? Question mark. Now, the more times you watch this replay, the more you will actually appreciate this finish from Jackson, especially if you play football and happen to be a forward like myself, or when I was actually playing football. Now, knowing he's got this in his locker, I'm starting to wonder if he was just having a horrible time adjusting to the Premier League throughout the first half of the season, as I had completely written him off and had no plans to even consider him on my wildcard. But seeing this goal, as well as how he was assisting Palmer in the goal that I went through about Palmer's first goal, or second goal, he is showing that he does have the qualities that we are looking for in a number 9. Now, he was also working very well with Palmer, notching up a few assists in the match, and with Palmer in such great form, Jackson could be the consistent assister to Palmer with what seems to be his shooting boots back on at the minute. So he could be in line to start picking up some goals and some assists. Now, next week's fixture against Arsenal will be top of the full match watch agenda for myself in order to scout Jackson ahead of my wild card and the two doubles that Chelsea have yet to play, because I am still not 100% on putting him in, given what happened with the penalty incident. So, if you are not aware, there was a penalty awarded in the match which Palmer ended up taking, but Jackson lost his head. He is seriously a man that is not in control of his emotions, showing why he has so many yellow cards to his name, as he does let these emotions get the best of him. Now, I'll very quickly read my raw and unedited match notes to paint the picture for you all. So the 61st minute, penalty awarded to Palmer. Madueke was taken out too, but the ref pointed to the Palmer incident where his back heel was stood on. So the penalty was in fact awarded to Palmer, even though Madueke was taken out, and Madueke might have missed the fact that the ref actually pointed to Palmer for the foul rather than the fact that Madueke went down. So Madueke was probably thinking that he himself had actually earned the penalty, and at this point Chelsea were already 3-0 up in the match. However, Madueke picks up the ball looking to take the penalty. Then when Palmer goes to take it off him, Madueke pulls the ball away from Palmer. Now, it's quite common in the Premier League for someone else who's the non-penalty taker to be holding the ball, and then the penalty taker walks up to them and takes the ball off them so that they don't get the opponents in their ears, or the goalkeeper doesn't necessarily know who's taking the penalty. There's lots of reasons for this. But for Madueke to pull the ball away from Palmer as he's reaching out to get the ball is highly unprofessional, to say the least. Now, Gallagher ends up pulling the ball off Madueke and then handing the ball across to Palmer, because he is the penalty taker. And then Jackson runs in and tries to take the ball off Palmer. What is going on in that Chelsea dressing room? This is ridiculous. Palmer's the penalty taker. I don't know if Pochettino enforces the penalties to be taken by Palmer like Pep does with Haaland or not. And I am thinking back to Pep screaming at Haaland from the sidelines, "You have to take it. You have to take it," when he gave the penalty away and that player ended up missing. I think it was against Brighton. It was about 2-0 at that point, would have put them up 3-0, but instead Brighton got the ball, ran to the other end, scored a goal, and it became 2-1. Yes, they are up 4-0, and Madueke thinks he's been awarded the penalty, but you don't go messing around with your main penalty taker by adding pressure on him with actions like this. Yeah, the pressure is reduced because they are up 3-0, but you don't need to announce to the team that there's problems within your the opponents, that there's problems within your camp by all squabbling over who is taking the penalty. Now, of course, Palmer steps up to take the penalty, still manages to stay cool and sink the penalty. And then, of course, he runs away to go and celebrate scoring the penalty. And as the camera pans across to Jackson and Madueke, Jackson looks to be steaming, walking away from Palmer as he celebrates scoring the penalty, with Madueke looking to try to pull Jackson back towards Palmer, saying, it's all right, and trying to calm Jackson down. My final match notes are, Jackson is a loose unit, unable to control his emotional outbursts, and his stroppy attitude, somewhat smelling like jealousy, is affecting the whole team, bordering on being a liability. Pochettino is going to have to sort this out quickly. Does that mean he just gets some stern words or worse? So I thought I would point that out because we need to keep a pretty close eye on what is happening in the Chelsea versus Arsenal fixture this weekend, given that Chelsea do have the double in the coming game week. And Jackson is probably up the list of candidates that people will be looking to put into their wildcard squads. And we would not want some surprise benchings as a way to try and calm Jackson down, as this is what actually ended up happening earlier in the season when Jackson was picking up yellow cards every week for fun. They were trying to obviously, rein him in, and they did so by benching him. So we need to keep an eye on that for our wildcard next week, or for any of you that are looking to bring in some additional Chelsea assets. So on to the 1 week punts then. So I made my mind up a couple of weeks ago that I was going to sell Son this game week, in game week 34, in order to buy another doubler into my team. And on Thursday, so this is actually yesterday in New Zealand, I was checking the price sites and saw that Son was going to drop in price, which would have been the 0.1 million drop, which would have affected my sale price on Sun, meaning I would have lost the 0.1 of sale price. And my intended target of Eze was also scheduled to rise. So as you can see on screen, I've already bought Eze into my squad. I made the early move for Eze yesterday. And even though I am wildcarding next week, and I have more than enough funds to buy pretty much any player for my second free transfer this week, this drop of Sun would have cost me 0.1 million when I buy him back next week on my wildcard, if I did not sell him before his price dropped. And additionally, with so many transfers still to make this game week, catching the Eze price rise means I'm already going to be 0.1 million up on the deal as Eze rises in price. And by the end of the week, he could have already gone up the 0.2 required for me to actually earn 0.1 million out of Eze before I immediately sell him on wildcard. And because Palace had no further fixtures to play midweek, I just made the move early and have brought Eze into my team. Now, the only other players that I was actually considering for this midfield spot would have been Havertz, had I not already been tripled up on Arsenal. And I don't think Havertz has enough in his locker to warrant doing some sort of sideways switch of Odegaard or Saka to Havertz. And the only other player that I would have potentially been considering was Diaz. And Diaz wasn't really in the mix for consideration given his increased rotation risk with Jota back fit. and so that is why I am avoiding Diaz, as I do not really like playing with assets that are rotation prone, could come in off the bench, and their only route to points is through open play. I'm more than happy to play players off the bench that have multiple routes to points, like penalties in their locker or on set pieces or taking corners or whatever it might be, or just an exceptionally outstanding attacking wingback or something like that. But for someone like Diaz or Jota or whatnot coming in off the bench, I don't really like investing in those type of players. Now, before we dip out of discussing midfielders, on Havertz, he has recently emerged as a talking point, and he has been pretty decent of late, warranting the discussion. Now, in the past, Havertz has seemed to be one of the more shot-shy forwards, contributing to a general feeling that he's a wasteful forward amongst FPL managers. Now, this is sometimes being shown on the pitch by him opting to overplay by passing the ball to a teammate instead of taking a very good shooting opportunity, or when he hits a shot, sometimes he hits that shot somewhat timidly and it comes across as wasteful, as it's not really a strong attempt in on goal. And I think that is probably what has been contributing to the general conception amongst FPL managers that he is a bit wasteful in front of goal. However, with his recent run of consistent minutes in the number 9 position, he may have finally settled into the unfamiliar role and could be building up his understanding of that role to start confidently pulling the trigger more often. Now, if I wasn't already tripled up on Arsenal, I would be giving serious consideration to bringing in Havertz, say, instead of Odegaard. If I had the choice now, I think I would probably go with Havertz, as he is playing that number 9 position, is closer to goal, and does look to be shooting a little bit more often. So, for those of you that out there that are not already tripled up on Arsenal, he is a very nice differential to look to be running with. So that's one of my free transfers already spent. Son has gone for Eze, and I have one free transfer in the bank. Now, I was planning to make my move of going Botman to Virgil van Dijk. That was going to be the move. But unfortunately, Semenyo has put a bit of a spanner in the works. Now, Semenyo's injuries occurred in gameweek 32, where he actually asked to be subbed off as he was feeling a little bit of tightness and had been ill that week. So it actually didn't sound like too serious of an injury, and I was actually looking at some moves that involved actually playing Semenyo last week in game week 33 against United. I think it was last week, was it? Yeah, I was going to play him against United. However, he has missed the team sheet entirely for that fixture, in which Bournemouth actually dominated the stats for again. Yeah, United got smoked on the pitch. They were very lucky to come away with what United managed to muster in the match. But Semenyo now has an unknown return date, and so I'm thinking that this injury could be a lot more serious than initially thought. So my options are, I could spend my one remaining free transfer on Semenyo to pretty much most of the any forwards that are doubling this week, and just play Burn off my bench as a single game weeker away to Crystal Palace. That is an option. I do not want to at all be playing 4 defenders at the back. That's not the type of manager that I am. I just think there are more points available in midfield and forward spots. I could look to play Palmer off the bench as a single game weeker and still follow through with my defensive move to go for a Liverpool defender to get a little bit of coverage in that Liverpool squad, as they have the 2 best fixtures on paper and do have some key defensive assets back in their squads. But I am also considering potentially selling both Botman and Semenyo and taking a hit this week. So very quickly we'll go through the Semenyo replacements in forwards. Now, there's not a huge amount of options on offer for a 1-week punt on a forward, and the short list of candidates that I have down is either Darwin Núñez, who, if you've been following the channel for a while, will know that I do not particularly rate and do not really want in my squad. Cunha from Wolves. However, they have an incredibly tough fixture away at home to Arsenal. I wasn't sure if it was home or away, but it is at home. But an attacking player from a non-very attacking Wolves team against probably the best defense in the league as one of the games in the double does not really excite me a hell of a lot. And so my third and last standing candidate is actually Mateta from Crystal Palace, who unfortunately I have not actually watched nearly enough, only really casting my eyes over him briefly in last week's fixture, as there was a little bit of talk being generated about Mateta, but I wasn't really honing in on him because I had no plans to actually be buying a forward. So, unfortunately, even though I do not really like buying players just because they sit at the top of the list of at the top of an ordered list of players ranked by expected stats, I don't actually have enough time to go back and sit down and watch Crystal Palace's last couple of full matches in order to really get an idea of what Mateta is all about. Now, his expected stats are pretty decent. Those alone probably giving me enough confidence to bring him in, but I do like to cast my eyes over a player before I bring them into my squad. And I am thinking about Hwang Hee-chan here earlier in the season, who I also ended up picking based on expected stats. Sat down and watched him like a hawk in the match and absolutely rued my decision for bringing him in. Do not like owning lazy forwards. And I do not recommend picking players just because they're at the top of expected stat lists, but I am left with very little choice here. And so I think my one free transfer is actually going to be spent on selling Semenyo to Mateta if I find that Semenyo is in fact out for the weekend. So my second transfer will be Semenyo out to Mateta if Semenyo is out. However, if Semenyo is fit, then I will be looking at a Liverpool defender to come in for Botman as my second free transfer. Now, on Liverpool and the defensive line, I was actually looking at the prospects of bringing in Alisson last week, and had a backup of bringing in Henderson if I did not get any news as to whether or not Alisson was going to be back in the squad. And I could not find any information on whether or not Alisson was starting, but he did in fact start for Liverpool last week. So Liverpool now have their number one back in net. Actually made some amazing saves in that match. Was it Crystal Is it Crystal Palace? Shit. Where's Liverpool? Salah. Yeah, Crystal Palace. Man, that 1-0 loss could have quite easily been 3-2 in either direction in that match. There was some incredible defending going on in that fixture, and Alisson did in fact make some point blank saves that were actually rifled at him and managed to keep out of the net. So Liverpool have actually only kept like one clean sheet in 11 or something. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Where was it? I'm pretty sure it's 1 in 11. I can't actually look at Salah there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, one clean sheet in 11 game weeks. So people are kind of losing faith in the Liverpool defense. However, they have been without, for a large period of that 11 matches, have been without Alisson. Now, Kelleher is a decent enough keeper, and so that wasn't a huge loss. But Alisson is probably one of the best keepers in the world, and so he will definitely save a few goals that Kelleher may have in fact let in. Now, we have seen Kelleher let in a bit of a howler over the last couple of game weeks. I'm remembering one where he went down and the ball went underneath him, and he should have quite easily saved that. But additionally, Trent Alexander-Arnold is also back, somewhat forced back into the squad by the Bradley injury last weekend. And Robertson has actually been back in the starting lineup for the last couple of game weeks. So the reason they haven't been doing so well is their first choice defensive line haven't actually been on the pitch. And so I am looking at the prospects of bringing in a Liverpool defender, potentially even for a hit, if I do in fact find out that Semenyo is out this weekend. So Bradley got injured in game week 32, and Trent came on for the last 45 minutes or so. 42 minutes he played in the second half of the game week 32 fixture, and then he started the Atlanta match this morning or yesterday. I can't actually remember when that was, and ended up playing about 70 odd minutes. So with Bradley out and Trent playing that 70 minutes, I actually think Trent probably starts again this weekend. Now, I know some managers out there are a little bit concerned that Gomez could quite easily play in right back instead, and Trent will be without match fitness. But typically, when players come back from injury, they usually get about a 30-minute appearance off the bench, which may have been what the plan was for that match where Bradley actually ended up getting injured. We don't actually know whether or not Trent was due to come on in that fixture, but he was on the bench, so he was fit enough to be on the bench, and he could have quite easily been getting subbed on for the last 30 minutes to then look to play at least 60 to 70 minutes in the next match to work on his match fitness. And then it is usually after that 60 to 70 minute performance that players start getting back into the typical 90-minute run out. So yes, Trent has been forced back into the team by Bradley's injury, but he could have also been scheduled to come on in that match anyway, and they could have been looking to start him in the Atlanta match as well. Now, Klopp will be very aware that they have not been keeping many clean sheets of late, and so I'm sure that he will be working hard to get them, or to get his first choice players back onto the pitch. And so I'm actually tipping that Trent is going to be starting both matches in the double this weekend, maybe getting subbed off at about the 80-minute mark in that first match due to the fixture congestion and the fact that he potentially had to play a little bit longer in that first run-up in game week 32, I think he probably gets at least one 90-minute run out, if not two. And I am very seriously considering taking a hit for Trent, given he has got so many routes to points. So there are only a few weeks remaining until the end of the season, and I really want to have a shot at ranking up. And so I do need to take a calculated risk or two before the end of the season. And with the pedigree that Trent comes with, he could very well end up in my squad for a hit this weekend. And hope that we hit Jin on a very low-owned player who comes with a very big ceiling if he starts to fire. Now, Trent is usually on a lot of set pieces. He sometimes plays that inverted wing-back role where he can get forward, can shoot from quite far out, does take some dead ball shots as well from outside the 18-yard box, and so he does have a lot of routes to points, and he is the kind of player that could end up ranking me up in this double game week. Now, he's only owned by, I think it's like 8.8% of players or something in the game entirely. Okay, 8.9, so he is gaining a bit of traction. At my rank, he's probably down in the 10 to 15% type owned categories, and if he comes away with a double-digit haul, that alone is probably going to be enough to get me some pretty decent rank gain in my final 1 week punt before I wildcard next week. So I'm very, very heavily leaning towards bringing Trent in for a hit this weekend. Of course, if Semenyo is deemed fit, I'll just be bringing in Trent for Botman, and that will be my second free transfer. But just to very quickly tie off the rest of the Liverpool defense, Robertson is a huge shout as well. He is probably a little bit more assured to get 2 90-minute runouts and looks to be getting very far forward in the style that we are used to seeing Robertson do, underlapping Diaz out on the left, working his way into the box, sending those little cutback shots across the 18-yard box. He could easily come away with some attacking returns and could be a very nice roll of the dice for any of you out there that cannot quite make the leap all the way up to the 8.4 million price tag that is on Trent's head. But if you just want to be dull, boring, and incredibly safe, the obvious play is Virgil van Dijk, who is slightly more expensive than Robertson. However, he comes with very, very little attacking threat, and you're really only looking at a headed chance from either a set piece or a corner. There's nothing else really to write home about. He's not going to do very well on the bonus because that's usually eaten up by the attackers, as Liverpool tend to score quite a few goals, and so Virgil's probably a 6 or a 2-pointer, but should be nailed on to play. And alright, well, that wraps up this video. So remember to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until next time, I will catch you again shortly. Cheers.